Thanks for joining me for the Pray for Micah podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review, and check out my YouTube channel and follow me on social media. Pray for Micah Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And now, on with the show.
Welcome to the Pray for Micah podcast. And now your host, Micah Chrisman.
Welcome to the Pray for Micah podcast, where we explore art, activism, spirituality, and our cosmic insignificance / significance. So I'm here with Victoria Lynn, and she is a yoga instructor, martial artist, and life coach that is passionate about embodied healing and freedom. She utilizes Jungian principles like shadow work and subconscious reprogramming to guide her clients in their transformation to unlocking a more conscious life. Through compassionate inquiry, Victoria's purpose is to help you alchemize your life's learnings and remind you of your sovereignty and the medicine found in your own inner wisdom. I know you said I could shorten it, but I loved that wording at the end. So I was like, it's going to go in. It's going to be in there.
All good. All good.
All good stuff. Victoria, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Super happy to be here. It's been fun to see you on Instagram posting just clips of your interviews with rad people that I know. And it's been awesome to just see you kind of launch this project. So
yeah, well, yeah, this will be episode 16. So still young podcast.
Okay.
We just started in November because I'm a plurality. I'm a multiple. Me and myself and I. Me and my shadow self.
There we go.
We'll get into it.
Yeah.
I figured that's why I was like, I should have her on this podcast so I can explore all my inner demons with her. You know, like just let's get them all out. That's the whole purpose.
Let's have a therapy session.
We're praying for Micah. That's the whole point. That's the whole thing. Is like everyone's praying for me. If you're an atheist, you're like, well, you've got me praying for you somehow, Micah.
So, I love it.
Yeah, it's been really fun just having friends, some who I've only had a couple that are not in the area. So It's been fun. But even some of the folks in the area, they still want to do it virtually. But it's always nice to have someone in space in my home, in my house.
Yeah, it really is so different in person.
Yeah.
There's just a different energy exchange than virtual. So.
And I get to host people, give them a LaCroix beverage. Here,
Guava.
We'll do a little
cheers.
Little cheers.
There we go.
I mean, according to the Irish, it's bad luck, but you know, I like it.
Are you sponsored by them? Because we just basically gave them free advertisement.
Well, you probably should. Yeah. Limoncello, LaCroix, Guava Sao Paulo.
Little guava. There we go. That's awesome.
They should be sponsoring me for how much I drink it.
Right?
There's a lot of people. In fact, actually, I haven't made up a fake sponsor in a while. That used to be kind of my thing. So,
really?
Yeah, I think today.
What are some of your past ones that you've done?
Oh, I literally half the time I make them up on the spot. So today I think the ones are going to be the West Coast Aardvark Rescue.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of the Grand Trans-Pacific.
Okay.
Yeah, international.
Wow.
Yeah, they're sponsoring this show. They're praying for Micah.
Wow, well, thank you so much.
Them and their aardvarks are praying for me.
That's such a mouthful. I feel like they need an acronym. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. It's
There's some acronym in there.
Take the first letter of all those words I just said, and there's something in there that will be a good acronym.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think I had like the Witches Coven of Massachusetts, and I just been making. I don't have any sponsors. If you want to
literally make these up on the spot.
I usually do. Yeah,
that's very impressive.
I literally just made that one up. Yeah,
that's great.
I don't know. I mean, it's not that hard. I mean,
yeah.
I just start making up words.
Weird and funny with it.
Yeah. That's how I do. That's my motto. That's my approach for most things in life. Just
love it.
Be weird and funny about it, you know.
You have to be light, you know? Like, there's no point in being so serious through life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there are times where, like, friends will be like, Micah, you just shared something really deep and, like, emotional with a smile on your face. Like, what's up? But, like something really sad. Like, I don't know. Someone died in my life, and I'm somehow end up, like, trying to, and, like, so some of it's a thing I have to work on, like, all right, you know, I really am feeling sad, but it's almost can be like, I'm trying not to feel sad or bring the mood down, you know, say something serious and like, I don't have to chuckle at the end of that.
Right. Yeah. Like a coping mechanism or something.
Exactly. And I'm like, I can be a very serious person. It's not like I avoid going, sad and serious with somebody. It's just sometimes it just depends on the thing. It'll just end up being like, oh man, these people were hit by tornadoes and, no, I'm just kidding. No, that's
You're like, let me just chuckle at the end of that.
Yeah, let me
Don't want anyone feeling awkward.
Like the whole world's falling apart. Global warming. Just like, what? My God. That's some heavy shit you're talking about. And somehow you're doing it with a laugh on it.
Yeah, you're like, I'm terrified, but I'm smiling at the same time.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. So.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you, like, I'm curious to know if you've learned about that coping mechanism more through studying like the Enneagram or human design or any personal development tools. Like,
yeah.
What have you learned about yourself with that?
Oh, yeah, it's a good question. Well, as far as the Enneagram goes, I am a 2.
Okay.
And so I definitely have this need to want to, show up, be there for people, and, want to be the servant, for lack of better words.
Yeah.
I hate to just degrade,
yeah,
summarize, but that's how it is kind of things with these things. Like, it's a one-word thing. It's this color. No.
Yeah.
And then there's so much layers to it. It's all these colors and all these nuances to the number.
It's so multifaceted, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if the 2 gave me a lot of knowledge about maybe the coping mechanism of like trying to find humor or trying to, somehow talk about something serious and I'm smiling about it. But I would say if it was the tie to the 2, it'd probably be because, I'm like somehow not trying to like labor people with something heavy and emotional.
Yep,
and so, let me alleviate it by doing some kind of, more comical interaction about it, or present myself and not such, maybe I really am feeling sad and like emotional about this thing, but I'm not going to present myself that way because I don't want to be burdensome to you.
Yep.
And
I was going to say burden came up for me. Like when you were saying like, let me take this on so I don't have to put it on you. It's like that's where that coping mechanism probably comes from. Where it's like, if I laugh it off, then maybe you won't feel like you have to take on this heaviness that I'm feeling or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I also just find myself always having to stop myself from saying I'm sorry for things.
That's huge for 2s.
I'm like the sorriest person you've ever met, like,
do you have friends in your life that are like, Micah, stop saying sorry?
They literally, yes.
Like, I'm going to smack you if you say sorry again.
Yep. Yeah.
That's good. Keep those people around, right?
Oh, yeah. They're just like, Micah, why are you apologizing? I'll like say I'm sorry if I tell them like a big heavy thing. Like if I really did go on a big tirade about something that frustrated me or I'm upset or something that happened in my life. And I'm just like, yeah, thanks for listening to me. Sorry, I went all... No, dude, like that's what we're here. We're just talking. Like, you don't have to be sorry for talking about your feelings. I'm your friend. It's like... Oh, that's a nice reminder. Thank you. I don't know why it's so hard for me to just like accept that this person's sharing space with me and they're holding that with me and they're not taking it with them home, So it's like, why am I picturing it as like a burden,
Yeah, there's so much to learn from the Enneagram. It's kind of wild. I feel like every couple of years it like transitions to a new modality. Like Enneagram was really hot for a while, right? Like especially when we were both involved in like Open Table and like kind of in the spiritual community. Enneagram was kind of the vibe. And now it's like human design. And then there's like all these other things that keep coming out where people are able to find out more and more about. I don't like to say fixed personality types because I think we're like kind of on a spectrum, but you're able to just find out more about like, how do I operate and why do I operate that way? I think the curiosity of that is so fascinating.
Yeah, it really did open my eyes, like, as far as like seeing, when I'm in a healthy place, I take on the good qualities of the 4, which is like creativity. And so it just made sense when I'm like, oh yeah, like when I'm in an unhealthy place, I go into this like, honestly, like cleaning frenzy. When I'm just like, okay, I can control this thing. So I'm just going to like vacuum or like do something very like, I need to control my environment or the outcome or, something that. But when I'm in a healthy space, you let go of that control and you get tapping more of the creative mind.
Yes.
And you get to explore more. And I'm just like, oh yeah, I've seen that. Or like, oh, I let my writing take, you know, how I'm feeling more, or more expressive in my writings or different things. Yeah.
That's
What's your number?
I'm a 4.
You're 4.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I disintegrate into, is that a word? That's
It is a word.
right?
And
okay.
no,
I was like, when I said it, I was like, wait a minute. That doesn't sound right.
I can never remember I know it's integrate.
Yes.
Into like the positive
Yes.
aspect.
So I disintegrate into a 2. So when you're healthy, you go to a 4. You go to the individualist, the romantic type.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm unhealthy, I go to the 2.
Okay.
So I go to the like, let me do everything for everyone so I don't burn. Like I basically abandon myself for the sake of like making sure everyone else is good. Right.
Right.
But when you're healthy, the 2s integrate into, the 2s when they're unhealthy integrate into 8. Disintegrate. Yes. Sorry.
Yes.
All these freaking words.
I know.
You get what I mean. But
there's an arrow going up in this direction.
There's all directions. But it's interesting because that's what I love about the Enneagram is like it's expressed in so many different ways. And we essentially, I believe that we each carry bits of each number in our expression. But at certain times of our life, certain numbers are expressed more than others. There's like a central way that we express ourselves. And then there's like, we're multifaceted. So there's different ways that shows up in our life. So
I resonate with that.
Yeah.
I know that, I don't know, we did a book study at Cherith Brook and it went into like childhood traumas. And I'm like, okay, I can see some of that, the 2 at play with like church culture and like just needing to serve like the next pastoral figure, whether it was my parents or the actual pastors or leaders in the church. But I really feel like energy wise, I was a 7. I feel like, I don't know, when I was younger anyways, I feel like I was more of the, hey, let's just have a good time, you know?
Totally.
Like,
yeah.
So I don't resonate with that maybe as you move through life, you might take on other qualities.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And actually it's interesting because I heard, this is not like scientifically proven or anything, but I have heard from folks who have studied the Enneagram or are like Enneagram experts, especially those that are in like the evangelical Christian world. They've talked about how a lot of women actually think that they're 2s or test as 2s at first when they're getting into the Enneagram, because it's that idea that we've been conditioned as women, like the servant. You're always serving. You're like you think about yourself last.
Yeah.
Like we don't. There's this level of like giving and giving and giving that we just give to the world and to people, but we don't actually know how to receive.
Yeah, right.
Because we've been taught that like we come last. So it's interesting to me. Just I think there's so much to learn from the Enneagram and other tools. But anyway, I'm not an Enneagram expert, so I just want to put that out there as a disclaimer for everyone on the podcast right now listening.
But if you're an Enneagram expert and you want to sponsor this podcast,
please sponsor this podcast if you are an Enneagram expert.
Did you feel like it was difficult to accept the 4 as your number? Because I always feel like the 4 is always like, for some reason, maybe that's a stereotype of the 4, so I'm sorry, but I just feel like there was a person in Cherith Brook. She was part of the book study with the rest of us, and you know, it was just kind of one of those things.
Rejected her number.
Yeah, she was just like, I don't believe I'm the 4. But then the more we talked about it, it just was very clear that she was like,
she was a 4.
Yeah, that she's. Yeah, like I don't see it as a bad thing. I'm like, it's like the creative thing.
Yeah.
And you're trying to be unique in yourself, but I don't know. I think sometimes people interpret it as like the selfish or like the, I don't know. I don't know what that, maybe that's not right. Yeah. I guess like just the whole like, saying. I want the spotlight kind of thing.
Yes. Like, and I do think that 4s can, like, I will absolutely admit that as a 4, like I can become very self-absorbed in my emotions. And
I see. Yeah.
That's where I think the selfish component comes in, right? Like if I'm feeling something strongly and I'm in my own spiral of feeling something, I've become so self-absorbed with it that I'm not actually living in reality. I'm living in my own head, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so everything becomes about what I'm feeling and everything needs to be dictated by that. And so it's like 4s are moody. Like we're moody, and I'm a Cancer sun, so I'm like freaking triple moody, and I'm a Gemini rising, so like talk about intense combo right there. So yeah, I think, you know, the 4s are very much I feel like 4s either like reject their number or they really embrace it, because there's a part of them too that's like, you know, they're not just called the romantic, they're called the individualist.
Right.
They want to be original. Like their thing is like, I want to know that I have like purpose and originality, and I can bring something to the table that's unique, and that my gifts can be used in a very unique way that no one else has ever been able to use them in, you know? And so I do think there's this pursuit, this desire for that. But I also think that if unattended, if you're not aware of your tendencies, then you can absolutely become self-absorbed in those pursuits, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the whole tool of the Enneagram in general, right? Is like, it just gives us a shape and mold potentially of the underlying, like, I don't know. I thought it was just interesting when someone first described it to me. That's like, oh, if you're going to do the test, you actually need to like, it's better to do it when you're like 24, 25.
Yeah.
Like you need to have some like lived experience to see patterns in your life, to like see something that because it's like, those are underlying behaviors that are tied to this inner child, this whatever, they didn't say abandoned child, but basically whatever traumas you went through as a kid. Oh, I wasn't shown love unless I proved myself loyal or did a service, then okay, that kind of bleeds out. And or, you know, I wasn't appreciated for my artistic creativity, and so you delve into that, you know, that inner creative. And there's 12 of them, so there's or wait, right?
There's 9. There's 9.
Yeah, see, fact check me. Somebody
someone fact check us, because we're clearly not experts over here. So
well, when you brought up like Gemini, I was like, oh, that's a whole world I don't even
astrology.
know.
I was gonna ask if you've had someone on the podcast talk about astrology before. I feel like it's such a hot topic. Like, oh yeah, and there's so many memes I see out there of like men essentially like criticizing women for how obsessed they are with astrology, right? Like in the dating dynamic, it's like when a woman asks a man, like, what's your sign?
Oh, it's one of the options on Bumble. Yeah. It's
no, it's not. Is it really?
Yeah. You could choose like, I'm this Gemini or Cancer. Yeah. You can totally.
I'm not surprised, actually. It makes sense.
Yeah. I just tell people like I identify as a Cancer.
What are you?
Well, so the whole thing is that I was born June 21st. Oh, so I'm literally
you're on the cusp of Gemini and Cancer.
Yes. It's the summer solstice.
Summer solstice. That's a great birthday to have.
I know. I've always loved having my birthday on June 21st. But literally I asked my mom, I was like, hey, can I get my birth certificate? Because everyone's asking me.
Yeah, everyone's asking
Everyone's so
I was
curious.
Born.
When I tell people that, I'm like, well, I don't really know. When I look it up, it's these two options. Yeah. And I literally look over, and there's no timestamp on it. There's no time of birth.
They didn't put a time?
No. They did not put a time on my birth certificate.
Does your mom remember?
And so I asked her, and I was like, so apparently if I was born between midnight and 3 a.m., then I would have been a Gemini. And then between 3 a.m. and sunrise, like whenever
you've done some research.
Yeah, like somebody was helping me, like one of my friends. I can't remember who it was, but somebody was like, they were helping me like, between that window. And she's like, I honestly don't know. It was in the middle of the night and it was dark. I just know it was dark because it was a really bad pregnancy. The pregnancy wasn't bad, but it was a bad night. The
labor.
So I don't know. Do you want to hear some details? I won't get too gruesome.
I mean, do you want your audience to hear details?
Mom's going to hear it. Mom's my audience. So she already knows the story. She lived it. I just think it's kind of a funny story too. It's how I entered the world. So it's about time the world learned how.
The world should know how you entered.
How did Micah come to exist in this world? So my mom goes in, and she had some kind of thing with her first pregnancy where she had to have a C-section, and so then basically that became the norm for all the other kids in the family.
And how many of you are there?
There are 5 of us.
So she had 5 C-sections.
Yep, she did.
Wow.
My 3 older sisters, me, and my brother. And it was just kind of one of those things like that was the safest way. Yeah. Since they had to do it the first time with my oldest sister. And so I'm like the first son to come, and so they're excited. I mean, they're just dad's like, oh, we're gonna have a boy, and that's exactly how he sounds too. Oh, we're gonna have a boy, and the doctor gives like a numbing thing to her shot, and did not give her enough.
Oh God. So she's in like excruciating pain.
And so they started to like, cut. And my mom's like screams like, I feel that. And the doctor's just like, oh no, you just feel a pressure. You're just feeling a pressure. We'll wait a couple minutes. And so allegedly, I don't know where this video is, but my dad was recording it.
No.
And the doctor starts to make a cut again, and she just screams out, I feel that. And then the camera just apparently goes clunk, and it just falls over. My dad passes out.
He's like, oh, he passed out.
He passed out, yeah. He falls over.
Oh, my God.
He was just like, oh, my God, my wife's in pain. He's just holding his breath, I guess. I don't know. But apparently, like, the nurses, I had to, like, help him
oh, my gosh.
out. And they ended up just, like, knocking my mom out. And then when she awoke, I was out.
So they're both knocked out while you're being birthed into the world. No wonder your poor mother doesn't know the time of birth.
Yeah.
She was going through it.
She was going through some hell. Yeah. It's like, I'm just trying to have this baby, and this doctor is like stabbing me and not giving me enough medicine to like numb it. So,
jeez. But that's kind of it, the part about you getting to choose because you're on the 21st is like whichever one you feel most aligned with.
Yeah, I feel like I have more of the melancholy, more of the empathetic side.
Cancerian. I don't know how you say that. Energy, right?
Sounds official.
Yeah.
Cancerian.
Why not? We'll go with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like the Gemini, I don't know, I guess it's like the two-faced person, and but they're still fun. So then I like to basically I just try to I take the good qualities of Gemini.
I'm a Gemini if you want me to be, but I'll be a Cancer if you prefer that. You should put that on your Bumble. Born on summer solstice. My astrology is up for you to define. Whatever you want it to be.
If I remake the profile, I went and just deleted it. I was just like annoyed with the dates. People I was going on dates with, they were just I don't know, it was just not a good fit. I don't know, I was also just like, I need to save some money, and
it's expensive.
It's like,
and it's a lot of energy.
Oh yeah,
it's a lot of energy to be going on.
Oh, for sure. To messaging people, and they all want you feel like you have to give a unique message for everything, and share your whole life story because they're asking all these questions, and then they don't end up showing up for a date, and you're just like,
it's not worth it. What was your pickup line?
I don't know. I did a bit array of things like, oh, what's your favorite dinosaur? Hashtag pray for Micah. Well, no wonder Micah.
Hashtag pray for Micah.
Hashtag, no, I don't know.
So it was different every time.
Yeah, sometimes I'd just be like, hey, how's your week go? I don't know.
Gotcha.
It wasn't really
nothing
clever.
too catchy.
Right. I didn't want to come off too cheesy. I figured if they swiped right on me, they got to know he seems like a wholesome person. He's not like these 6-pack dudes who've gonna have a one-liner, like just
Have you ever seen Master of None on Netflix?
No. Is that with Aziz
Ansari?
Yeah.
Oh my God. There's this whole episode where he's like, it's about dating apps, and his pickup line is, I'm going to Whole Foods. You need anything? And it's hilarious because it just becomes this thing for him, and it works every time. Like every time he does it, the women are like, "Oh my gosh!" It's pretty funny. So after that, I feel like the pickup line became a thing on dating apps. You know?
Oh,
what I mean?
really? Yeah. Next time I have been learning some pickup. I don't know. I heard it somewhere. I was like, I like that one. It was like, are you American cheese, or are you cheesy or something? Because you look extra sharp today, or something like. Are you American cheese? You're looking extra sharp today. See, that would be mine. It just ended up like coming off as like a really bad dad joke.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, thanks for trying, but
also now I just want to go throw up. Now I just want to throw up after you just sent me that. Yeah, I just was like, good. For my mental health and money and finances, I just like, we're just gonna take a break from Bumble.
You do you.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Like I said, it was like sometimes you just like go out and have a fun date.
Yeah.
Ain't no thing but a chicken wing,
Yeah.
And
great dad joke. That was I heard that one. Slip that right in there.
Slip that in there.
Yeah.
Go get some wings. But yeah, it just like, and I get it. Like I wanted to try to like steer things towards like free dates, like where I don't have to go. I don't know, because there's just this weird social pressure of like, do I pay? Do I offer to not, or do I offer to not pay? Can I offer to not pay? But yeah, it always inevitably is like, hey, would you like to go to a park? Oh, I don't meet guys in parks on the first date. Like, Okay, fair. Like, you don't want to get like thrown in a van or something. Okay, you want to get coffee? Well, I don't get off work till 6 on Friday night. You know, and it's like,
I will say,
I guess we're going to go to dinner.
It is hard to know how to steer the conversation, especially on Bumble, where like the objective of Bumble is, well, actually, I liked Bumble more because Bumble's the one where like women take the lead, right?
Right.
Yeah. So like I was able to start a conversation with someone that I felt like I wanted to talk to. Mm-hmm. But on these other apps, like I do feel like the dynamic, everyone's different and their requirements for a first date are different. So you're either going to like hit the jackpot where you're like, oh, I asked her to go to dinner and she said yes. And that's exactly what she wanted as opposed to a park, right? It's like, it's always different because someone might be absolutely offended that you asked them to go to a park. Or someone else would be like, oh my God, I love being outdoors. Yes, let's do it.
Know.
I would love to go on a free date, you know?
Yeah.
It's just hit or miss.
It's hard. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I think there have been people that were like, yeah, totally cool with like meeting up for coffee or doing things. And I don't know. I guess I just try to like also make it fun for me. So like I try not to just like, hey, let me just pick these couple same spots and take all of them there. It was like, hey, I want to like, if it's gonna be coffee, I want to try a coffee shop I haven't been to.
Yeah.
You know, if it's, and like obviously try to like do it to where it's like in between where we live. So, but yeah, you got to be creative, and it's so much energy, and then you invest all this time and money and stuff, and it's just like, I don't know. It was nice to do it because it was like I started it when I was during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it was just like, okay, I'm working from home, I'm not meeting a lot of new people, and like as far as outside of like the work, like friend sphere, and so it was fun for that kind of deal.
Good.
But I feel like I'm back out doing things with friends. Yeah, socializing.
Yeah.
I just feel like there's more opportunities to just make something more organic and natural happen. But
that's good.
Yeah.
Well, good for you.
Bumble should be a sponsor for the show.
Yeah, I was going to say, we are giving a lot of free ads to people right now.
Well, let's do the conversation. Let's go. I feel like this is a nice tie to shadow work because, you know, that's part of the reason why I'm single is all my shadows. And so, Victoria, tell me.
Am I here to psychoanalyze you, Micah?
You
is
are.
that what we're about to do?
Please. I mean, I invited you here. It's free, you know, free therapy. So if I could get, no. You can tell me all the things that are wrong with me. No, but I'm curious, like, you're certified in like Jungian principles.
Yeah. Certified Jungian life coach. Yeah.
Life coach. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So tell me, what does that require to like become that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Not nearly as much as it does to become a psychotherapist, let me tell you. That was kind of like the direction that I was headed in is I wanted to go back to grad school, wanted to become a psychotherapist, was very passionate about utilizing not just talk therapy, not just like cognitive behavioral modalities, but more something that was like somatic, something that was a little bit more mystical too. So I looked at like spiritual direction programs, and I was just like, I was honestly just looking everywhere. And I finally landed on this specific program because the term life coach is really like wide spectrum of what it can mean. You know, you have like mindset coaches, you have like business life coaches, you have people who you have life coaches who their objective is to help you solve a problem, you know, in like a tangible way. And then you have life coaches who are here to help you develop as a person, which is a very different approach. Yeah. So this program in particular is based out of California. And there was a grad school that I was actually looking at out there. And I ended up finding this program online and signed up. I had like an initial intake call with one of the lead coaches. And as soon as she said like, we work with the ego, I was like, sign me up. Because I feel like working with the ego is one of the most effective ways for people to start to integrate their whole self, to like integrate their shadows, integrate their ego, understand what the ego is and what role it plays and why it plays that role and how I can actually befriend it to then like get to the deeper, juicier stuff that I've like been leaving at bay because it's like, I don't want to look at that, right? Those are our shadows. Sure. And so I've learned so much through this program and continue to learn every day. And the funny thing about it too is like, as soon as you sign up for something like this, you're like, oh shit, like I actually have to apply this to myself, right? So it's like, I went through 6 months of like, and still I feel like even now I'm still going through a pretty intense phase of life where like I'm examining my own shadows and understanding my own ego and going through an ego death of sorts that has been really painful but illuminating, you know. And like Carl Jung talks about that, like birthing consciousness is painful, but consciousness is what leads us to freedom. Like being able to choose a conscious life is what allows us to actually manifest the things we want in our life. And so that's why this program really drew me in. Wow. I felt like it was the perfect combination of like neuroscience, depth psychology, which is based on Carl Jung's theory, and then also like some Eastern spiritual principles, a little bit more of the mystical realm, which I personally love.
Right, because it kind of touches on dreams and stuff too, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's way more in depth than what...
No, it does. You're right. Yeah. So utilizing dreams as a way of being able to draw from symbols that you see in dreams. And so essentially, like when we're dreaming, we're in a dreaming state, our subconscious is coming through, it's speaking to us. And so there's a lot that we can glean from dreams because there's like subconscious wisdom there that in our waking life, we're not necessarily aware of. And so, I mean, dream work can get so in depth. It's so fascinating. Yeah. Working with symbols and being able to like even, lucid dream, you know, like there's a lot of different controlling ways that you can like start to work with dreams. And I'm so fascinated by it. And I've started keeping a dream journal, which has been really great. I was about
to ask you, I was like, have you ever done the whole dream journal thing?
Yeah. I feel like I was really good at it at the beginning, and I've sort of like fallen off a little bit, but most of us dream every night, whether we remember them or not. Like most humans are dreaming when we're in our REM state. And so I've been tracking my sleep, which has been exciting because I'm able, like when I have this little like app thing, I'm not going to say the name because I'm not going to give other free advertisement.
No more free spots. No more.
Y'all need to sponsor Micah if you want some of these name drops. But anyway, it's been fun for me to kind of like study like, oh, like I'm in a deep sleep, and this is how long I'm in REM. And then like, it'll tell me how long I've slept. And then I'll wake up in the morning. If I've had a dream, I'll like write it out. I'll sometimes post it on the forum of the coaches online that have gone through the program. And we'll start to just kind of like, some people are really, really into dream interpretation. So they'll start to offer their wisdom on it. And it's been fascinating. I do believe that dreams can be a foreshadowing of something, like a premonition. But I think most of the time dreams are just symbolic. It's a metaphor. Like if you dream about an X, it's not actually the X. It's what the X represents. Right. And so I think sometimes we wake up from dreams and we're like, wow, that was fucking weird. Like, I don't even want to like dive into that. Right. Right. And then you realize like, oh, it's just symbolic of something. Like it's all a reflection of something within you. Right. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's super fun. It's fun. If you like that kind of stuff. Some people don't want to like,
all about
dive
all of that
into
stuff.
Deep, you know.
Oh yeah, we're gonna just stick right here with it because I want to back up to what you were just saying about the idea that dreams could be premonitions of the future. And so, do you tie that to like a divine intervention, like God kind of figure instilling those dreams, or like I'm just curious what your view is on it, or. Because I've had dreams in the past where like, and I feel like I still have like moments like that where like, I don't know. And I know that like deja vu can be parts of your brain not catching up. This like you're processing in that moment and it feels really familiar.
Yes.
But there'll be some moments where it's like, no, I remember this in a dream.
Yep.
I don't remember when I had the dream, but I remember seeing this scene, having this conversation with these people, saying this phrase.
Yeah.
And it's really freaky.
Yes.
It's like more than a deja vu. And so I'm curious, like, what's your interpretation like on that of
premonitions?
Premonition and dreams. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely identify as a spiritual person. And so for me, I do believe that divine inspiration is around us all the time. And I believe it's within us. It's flowing through us, in us, and around us at all times. And so I do really believe that certain dreams can be foreshadowing of events. I do believe that people have like what's the term? Like clairsentient, there's a lot of like, you know what I'm getting at, more of like the psychic abilities of like clairvoyance, like having like a vision of like, this is what's going to happen. I believe to some degree, like we all embody gifts of understanding. Like the more you have a sense of awareness within, I think the more you start to kind of see that reflected out in the world. And that's all about Jungian principle too. It's like everything that's happening within me is being reflected out into the world. And so, you know, we think about like the state that our world is in, and I'm kind of veering off a little bit, but I'll come back to it.
Yeah.
We think about like the state that our world is in politically, and it's like, I'm not surprised, because how many of us actually like have a really healthy internal narrative with ourselves, right?
Sure.
And it's like, if we are in a battle with our own selves internally, that's just going to constantly be reflected out into the world in our actions, because our thoughts lead to our actions. Those actions have consequences, and here we are. And so I feel like when it comes to dreams, I think that I really believe in the two different things, where it's like subconsciously, it's an opportunity for us to become aware of certain patterns in our life. But I also think that on a very spiritual, divine level, certain dreams can actually allude to real life events that are about to happen. So the brain's amazing. I mean, I do not claim to be some like neuroscientist or anything, but as I've dived more into understanding how our mind works and understanding how our thoughts like truly affect everything that we do and say and kind of like are out in the world, I am just more and more fascinated by this kind of work, because to me, and this was kind of my tagline for a while, like I'm devoted to collective liberation through personal transformation, because that's how I believe we actually will get there. Yeah. Is through personal transformation. Yes, these greater actions that are happening in the world towards issues of injustice are important. But I also think that like, if we're approaching these things from a place of ego, what are we actually doing?
Right. We're just, solving today's, symptom thing that tomorrow we'll just replicate and repeat the same ills of power and domination, because we didn't change something inward about ourselves. Yeah. It's powerful. Yeah, I think it's a mixture of, definitely that personal work, and then there's the, collective work, that we do as far as the social and political environment. But that's powerful what you're saying, just to think about, I don't know, why is it always things are just, even when they talk about the political system and it somehow being brought down to just two parties, it was more back, early, America, and somehow human tendency is like, okay, we have all these contesting folks, in a fight for vying for power, and we need to simplify it to two candidates, or we need to simplify it down to two parties or two things, because there's just something about that in our brain that's just so
our brain wants to think in binary. Right. You know what I mean? Our brain wants to think good, bad, like evil, good, right? Like we always try to judge these things and categorize these things, and so it's easier for our brain to go there. So we want to think in these binary ways, and that's also internally reflected, right? Like we judge our actions, we judge our experiences, we judge our identities, and that's where a lot of shadow work can actually be really freeing, because we recognize that like, a lot of what I've been working around lately within my own self is like, in Jungian theory, they call it the anima animus, like the integration of the masculine and the feminine, or in like Chinese traditional medicine and like Taoist philosophy, they would call it like the yin and the yang, and like the masculine, the feminine, right? Like the elements of like power and surrender. And so it's like the both. We can embody both, but all our systems are set up in a way that's like, we have to choose one or the other, and we're constantly in this like internal tension. And that's always being reflected out in the choices we make out in the world, or like the things that we buy into, or the ways we've been conditioned to believe as women or men, or, you know.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot there that, like, you know, is a means of control. Like I talked about over 4th of July, I wrote something around this idea that, like, shadows are, like, there's political shadows, right? Like there are ways that we've been taught. And I kind of tie this into religion too. Like, we've been taught to demonize one and glorify the other, whatever that thing is, right? Whether it's like conservatism. Yeah. Right. But we've learned to other everything.
Right.
And so when we other it, we're judging it. And when we're judging it, okay, well, we're already creating this internal idea of like right or wrong. And when we do that, we then start to like combat, and we don't actually understand that, like, when we're coming from a place of combating something internally, like, there's more to reflect there. It's like, I want to be someone who's like for something and not like constantly against it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if any of that made sense, but that's some of my thoughts around, just politically where we're at, and how I see shadows playing out in our political system.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, because I feel like the same thing. I always hear the word ego and automatically go to, that's the bad side.
Yeah. Most people
like that
do.
whole binary thing. So can you give us like, how do you define like ego and like ego death, ego birth, you know, like how do you hold all of it together, and that, like, what is the positives of ego? Because like there has to be some element of me, right?
Yeah.
You know, we have to, I don't know. Again, it goes back, for me, it goes back to experiences, you know, people doing psychedelics, and it's like, I experienced an ego death. It's like, did we really though?
A lot of people actually do. Yeah. When they're on psychedelics, will experience some kind of ego death. Although I will say, I don't think you have to experience psychedelics in order to have an ego death.
Right.
This is
and
why
I don't think some of those people aren't really getting an ego death.
Right.
It's just burying the ego further, and then you had this in transit, like, you know,
you have this wonderful experience. But yeah, exactly. And I think, so the way I kind of describe it and break it down, and again, this ties back to Jungian theory, is like, so with Jungian theory, there's this belief that we have the true self. Yeah. And that true self cannot be harmed. And so when we think about the ways we have been conditioned in our society, either through generational patterns in our families, societal conditioning, political, religious, etc., we develop in the world what we call a persona. And that persona is how people see us, right? Yeah. So, for example, I'll just use like the religious perspective, because like I grew up in the church, and I'm a woman who grew up in the church, with the idea of purity culture being a thing, right? Right. So it's like, I grew up with an idea of like, this is how a woman should present, and this is how a woman should behave and talk and do and be and you know, all those things. And so you just do it. Like, it's like you develop a persona around these boxes or these things that you've been taught are good and what's bad, right? And usually that's influenced by your environment and your family and, you know, all those things. So when our persona and our ego work together, because our persona essentially keeps us safe, and our ego is working hard to keep us safe all the time. Right. And so I used to think that ego, like when someone would mention the word ego, I used to think it was like you. I was like, oh, that's bad. Like, ego means arrogance. Ego means narcissistic.
I thought you were going to say like me. You thought of me. Like, I thought of you. When I thought of ego, I thought of Micah. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. Okay. Here we are. That shows my inner fragile shadows. So
funny. Oh, that's hilarious.
I was like, oh, you thought of me.
Micah's like, I'm offended.
You know, hey. You know, if that's what happens, I can accept that truth.
Funny. You know? That's hilarious. But I thought of what you said, like around this idea of that, like when someone said you're being egotistical, that it meant you were like narcissistic or arrogant. Right. And I never in my life, like, in fact, what I had been taught was to be a very humble person, right? We're taught that in this Christian rhetoric. And so when I started to kind of break it down, I was like, oh, like your ego is actually working to protect you. So my ego's not bad. My ego is the thing that's like rising up and saying like, we want to protect you here because you've maybe experienced something at some point in life where you were rejected or lost belonging, or something was realized, some kind of fear was realized. And so now the ego is like, we're going to protect you from experiencing that again. And so it kind of creeps up from time to time.
Right.
That's why usually when you're going through a big life transition, that's when like your ego's the loudest, because it's really scary to be going through a transition. And so your ego's trying to protect you, right? It's like, are you sure you want to take that chance? Are you sure? Are you sure? Right? It's always like, we're going to try and keep you safe, Micah, right? Yeah. And so you make decisions based off of what's going to keep you safe and what's going to keep you aligned with that persona.
Right.
But when we start to actually work with our ego, we realize like, oh, wait, I don't actually have to be afraid of you. Like, you're just trying to protect me. Thank you for trying to protect me. But what I'm trying to do in this case is to actually like really align with my true self or my soul, right? Like if that's I know that not everyone really believes that there is a true self, or that like we really are souls in a body, but that's my belief. And so my hope as a coach is to help people reconnect to that, because it's a remembering. I don't think there's like, I think there's lots that's been layered on in our life that makes us think we have to be something out in the world because that's what's acceptable.
Right.
And then when we start to unpack that, when we start to work with our ego, we realize like, oh, like I actually have this whole side of me that's been afraid to actually be lived through me, because it's powerful and it's free and it's expressive. But what have I been taught about being those things, right? And so I don't know if that answers your questions. I have a very long way of answering questions, but
that's the whole
all
goal
that to
of
say,
this. I don't want the short answers.
Egos, you can befriend them.
Yeah.
You can really befriend them because they're actually there for you. They're there to work with you. And when you begin to integrate your ego, you actually like your shadows aren't so scary anymore.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Like your shadows are everything that you've rejected or repressed because you had this judgment around what was okay, what wasn't.
I guess that was my next question. Is like, yeah, what do you define like the shadow self versus like the true self? And like, because you're saying the shadow self is, you're saying it's elements of like a rejection of ourselves that we want to, like basically I'm guessing like baggage or parts of ourselves that were just like, hey, I was hurt, I was traumatized, and I just don't want to like look and or I hurt somebody else maybe. I don't know. I guess I'm curious what are the, how do you define the shadow self in relation to the ego?
That's a good point. So I'll use an example again of like how I've kind of personally been going through this transformation. But so for example, like I grew up with the narrative, and this was kind of the narrative in my family and my dynamic as a woman too, that like you're selfish if you express your needs. So if I grew up with a belief that I'm selfish if I speak my needs, then I'm going to develop a persona that is constantly giving and loving and never really expressing my needs because that's not okay, right? So I'm going to develop the opposite of that. So if in my shadow lives selfishness, in my persona lives selflessness. So I'm doing things out of my ego to come off as selfless. I want people to perceive me as selfless. But what's happening is that we're kind of manipulating how we want people to see us, right?
Right.
So it's like what's living in my shadow is selfishness. That needs to actually come up and be integrated, right? What if I were to actually voice a need and someone were to say I was selfish? What would happen? What would be the worst thing?
Back into never sharing what your needs are.
Right. And so it's like being able to sit with the emotions of the fear that comes up with that, right? And so when I started to work with that story of selfishness and started to realize that like, no, it's actually okay for me to list the things that I need or to have boundaries around my, like what I need and how I feel supported. I had to really sit with the fear of like, what if I did lose belonging with that person? What if they did call me selfish? Like, what would be the worst thing that would happen? And then I started to work with the perception of that. Like, why do I work so hard for someone else to perceive me as selfless?
Yeah.
Like, what am I trying to protect? And then once I started to work with both the shadow and the persona and ego, I started to realize, like, oh, if someone perceives me as selfish for putting up a boundary, that's on them, not me. You know, like, that's my decision. And if they perceive me as selfish, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
I can be okay that someone else thinks I'm selfish.
Right.
But I was creating my life in a way that was like, I need to make sure that you never think I'm selfish.
Right. Absolutely.
And so you're living out of your persona. You're living out of your ego. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Light bulbs going off. And now I'm just going back to all my therapy sessions and like thinking about, okay, that was, the way, I don't know. Yeah. Honestly, thinking about with my therapist, she just described it as like parts, like just parts work is what she called it. Is just, there's a part of Micah that wants to display this thing to be, get approval from people. Same kind of thing. Like, I don't set good enough boundaries sometimes with my time and energy. And so I'll just be like, you need me to like stop. Like I had a friend who reached out the other day and just wanted help with something that just would require a couple hours. And, you know, rather than coming up with an excuse or just things, I was like, hey, sorry, I can't do that tonight. I could do it, later
You
this
said
week.
that to them?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And just like,
So you set your boundary.
right.
Yeah.
Even though I had the availability to go help or do, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
was just kind of, I always feel guilty. And that's like some part of me that like needs to meet that.
Yeah. The guilt is like, there's a shadow there too.
Right. That like, I don't want, I want to be accepted and loved for helping. But then I also, in the past, just maybe always felt like I had to have a good reason. Otherwise, if I don't, then I feel guilty that I'm taking time for myself instead of just being selfish.
Yes.
And like, I love it because somebody was saying, we only have certain words like selfish, and maybe it was in Mandarin or something, but they have like 3 words for selfishness. And it was like,
Interesting.
And it basically,
And they all have different meanings.
right.
Yeah.
That basically there's like a version that's like self-interest. There's like a word, and like it's all tied to the same roots, but like, me waking up every day and making myself food, clothing myself, showering, that's a part of my self-interest.
Yes.
And that's not selfish to take care of my needs or to take time to even like, I don't have a physical thing to do, but I just wanted to read a book and chill. And I don't feel like going to help these people.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Did you feel guilty after you said no?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I sure did. I was just like, I probably could have just gone and helped them and figured it out and got back home and had my time to myself. And
that's what's interesting about shadow work is like, wherever there's a trigger, there's a shadow. Like the fact that you felt guilty, the fact that that situation triggered you to some degree means like, because if you were truly so okay with saying no, you wouldn't have felt guilty.
right.
But the fact that you felt guilty is like, okay, there's something here that I have internalized that is leading to this conclusion that I'm guilty, right? Whether it's like, and this goes back to the Enneagram, right? Like, so for 4s, for example, like the selfishness thing around me, for me was like, if I draw a boundary or if I draw a boundary and someone perceives it as selfish, I fear I'm going to lose belonging with them. And that's my core fear. I don't want to lose belonging with someone. And so for 2s, it comes, I have a lot of loved ones around me that are 2s. And I feel like for them, it's around being loved, right? So it's like, if you would have said yes when you wanted to say no, you probably would have come back and kind of resented them.
Right.
Because you did something when you really didn't want to do it.
Right.
And that was out of ego, right? And that resent is now on you, not on them. Because if you did say no, right? But there was a part of you that felt guilty. And so now it's like, okay, how do I work with the guilt?
Right.
Because I said what I wanted.
That's why I brought it up. That's why I have you here. I was like, there's this situation happened a couple of days ago. I need to work through this inner guilt,
Yeah, but it's like, I try to make it light too when I talk about it or when I work with clients, because it's not something to like when people think of shadows, it's like, ooh, like spooky, dark.
Stranger Things.
Yeah.
The upside down.
Totally. But to me, it's like, no, like shadows are actually illuminating. They're bringing to light something that wants to be released. So it's actually a good thing. It's an opportunity for you to actually like become lighter.
Yeah.
You know, it's your subconscious surfacing and being like, hey, this pattern keeps coming up. Maybe we should think about changing it. Why is it that I feel guilty every single time I tell someone no? Why is it that I say I'm sorry every time I tell someone something deep about myself or I feel like I'm burdening them with something, right? Begin to work with that, because that is where a whole world will open up for you. Yeah. You know?
Totally. I'm curious, and I'm just trying to understand, like, if you do this work, so like the clients and folks you work with, and then they are trying to implement these practices in their lives where they're analyzing their kind of subconscious actions or conscious actions and trying to understand where they're coming from in relation to their friends, family, community. How do you, like, I don't know, I tend to look at the world pretty generally positively. Like my interactions with people, I don't usually second guess if someone's like actually being if they're being an asshole to me, then I just like I see they're being an asshole.
Right.
But I guess I'm curious, like with this work, do you feel like it, and maybe I just don't understand it enough, do you feel like it could potentially be where like, oh, this person's trying to do this thing and they're really just doing it because they're ego, they're prideful, or they're does that make sense? Do you feel like people ever, like, I don't want to say weaponize it, I guess I'm just trying to understand, like, how do you take people's actions? Like my friend probably would have just took me as coming over as, oh yeah, Micah just like wanted to help and like showed up.
Yeah.
Was he just trying to like people please for me?
Yes.
Maybe that's not a very good question to ask. I guess
I think I get where you're coming at.
Yeah. I'm not asking it probably correctly.
Well, let me try and answer. I think what you're trying to say is like does the person, so if I'm working with a client, are they able to perceive people's intentions more clearly?
Yes. That's what I guess I'm trying to get to. Like, how are they analyzing people's intentions in a clear way? Yeah. I
think they're seeing it for what it is.
Okay.
And I think it's because, again, everything is internal. Like how I perceive myself internally is how I'm going to perceive the world.
Right. Yes.
And so when I'm triggered by someone's actions, I have to reflect back to me like, okay, like what within me, like where in my shadow is that? Because why am I triggered?
Yeah.
Why am I triggered that I put up this boundary? Clearly something still needs to be worked through. And so I feel like when you get to a point where you develop deeper self-awareness and you are like stronger in your boundaried ways, right? We're speaking about boundaries in this particular situation. Then I'm able, like, not only are my no's strong, but my yeses are that much stronger. Because now when I do say yes to something, I am wholeheartedly, authentically saying yes to this. And when I do that, I'm doing it from a place where like I'm ready to give, from like a place of like actually wanting to give, not because like, oh, I feel bad because they did this for me 2 years ago and I should give them and we have this whole fucking narrative that we just spiral into. And so like things can be perceived with just more like, I don't know how to describe it, like from a place of more truth, I feel like before I started doing shadow work, I was constantly trying to, because I have a history of dealing with some narcissistic relationship dynamics in my past. I was constantly on guard, like asking, like, is what they're saying true? Are they trying to gaslight me? Are they not? And I'm constantly like on edge. And when I started to realize, like, I don't actually have to be so guarded, because what I have is like, for example, like love is what we embody. So if I embody it, the object of that love may leave at some point, but it's still here. I still have it. And so if I'm acting from a guarded place, there's still a wound there that I don't trust enough to open up to someone else. And so when you begin to like work with your shadows, you truly begin to show up in a more authentic way. And not only do your boundaries change or they get stronger, right? But like you allow yourself to be more open and willing to engage with others from like a true, like, it's almost like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Where you're like, like I'm just me right now. I'm not trying to be anything but just me, you know? I'm not trying to act from ego. I'm not trying to manipulate them from this or that, or you're not playing these games anymore.
Right. Versus when you tamper it or when you shut it down, then you probably create more space.
I create so much drama for myself. You know, it's like
humans are great at that, aren't we?
Yeah. If I'm constantly worried about who's going to think I'm selfish for saying yes or no to what, then I'm constantly showing up to each social interaction, trying to make someone else perceive me a certain way. Mm-hmm. That's ego. Right. Whereas if I show up authentically, then to me, it's like, I really don't care at the end of the day what you think of me because I know who I am. And I'm okay. Like I can live with the fact that you might think I'm selfish for saying no to this or yes to that or whatever. Like I will live.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, it kind of just relates to like something I've been just kind of processing over the last the pandemic, I think, forced everybody to kind of take stock of like, where am I putting all my time and energy?
Yeah.
Because like suddenly all these things were cut off from us that we couldn't participate in. And we realized how much we were just busybodies with this or that thing. And so as we kind of are coming out on this side of the pandemic, kind of some people I think just rushed right back into, doing all of it because it was like, they were just so hungry and eager to just get back to filling their life with the things that they had. And so I get that to some extent. But I think there's other folks who try to be like selective of what they reintegrate back into their rhythms because they realize that, I was not in a healthy place before, being involved in a million different things and how much what I was being, so for me personally, like, just like the different groups and things I was involved with, like protests, and like I'll support those groups as much as I can and like do things, but like I just realized, okay, I'm one person and it's more of an ego thing to show up for all the meetings and like be not effective in any of the groups. Yeah. Like whether it's Casey Tenants or Sam, just all these different activist groups that were like, they want to do, I want to be a part of mobilizing or movement work. But I think it just for me was like that, take a step back to reflect on what am I doing for myself to put my, to get my ego in check. And I think that's where at first I was just like being super negative. Like, oh yeah, you just think like, I just was doing it all for the image of wanting to be the good white ally and the persona you want to put. And then you're like, no, like there was a genuineness to like what I was doing, but also like, there could be both. Yeah. And both can be true. It both can be true. Right. And that our ego does want to put our best foot forward and feel like we are accepted into that space. And then realizing, okay, what is it about me that needs that acceptance? Okay. That's why I'm going back to my church past that need to be in a circle that is accepting me. And I'm not those sinners, the us and them group, and that's me and my projection on that group, like the anti-racism group or the world, and not what they were doing in practice, but it's what I was bringing into it with this like church baggage, like mentality of how I show up in a space. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like you're swapping like one fundamentalism for another.
Right. Exactly.
And that's like for example, when I find myself doing that in something in my life, I'm quick to be aware now of like, okay, I haven't actually dealt with something there. Yeah. Cause like, it's almost like, people who had like a crazy life, like, and then they had this like 180 turnaround testimony and now they're like this huge believer and like preaching the gospel. And like sometimes like from a psychological standpoint, like I'm so fascinated by just psychology in general, but just like especially like when it comes to our religious ties, because I'm like, I don't actually think that when we swap one for the other, we're not actually addressing the root cause. Right. We're just continuing we're just like swapping out the addiction, right? It's like, whether it's alcohol or
I'm a
sex
vegan now.
or running or veganism, you know what I mean? It's like you've seen the light, but like what within you has actually changed, right? And this goes back to ego. Like, we can manifest anything out of ego, and we do it all the time.
Yeah.
But why I believe shadow work is so essential is because when we're able to work with our shadows, when we're able to, I call it integration, we're able to find a sustainable way of like actually manifesting the things we want. And not only that, we're just able to show up to the world in a much truer, authentic way.
Yeah.
And it's not anymore of like, I want to be the white ally that is seen as this or that. And it's just like, no, like, I actually trust my intentions. And I trust that like, this is the world I want to see. And because this is the world I want to see, I need to first embody it.
And now you can see that as if somebody was to challenge that, like, you're just someone who's like, if I really was worried about that persona, I might crumble or feel that person's words have eaten me alive. Yeah. And it's like, oh man, but when you get to that place, like you're saying, then it's like, no, I know my intentions and I know why I show up in this work, in this space. And
so you're not triggered,
right?
You're not triggered by who attacks you for being what or lack of what you are. Like, that's the thing. And let me just give a disclaimer here. Like, shadow work never ends. Like, this is not something that's like, I have become so enlightened that I'm never triggered. Like, we're humans. We're always going to be triggered to some degree. But the fascinating and amazing thing about us is that we can become more conscious and aware of those triggers. And so now when I'm triggered, instead of reacting, I'm now responding because I've become aware of where this trigger is coming from.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
So in relation to this and like your yoga practice and everything else, like, how do you see, like, when you're working with clients, like, how does like all of that intersect with each other? Like, I'm curious about the world of Victoria and how you're doing these beautiful practices. Yeah. That are just, but when you're working with clients, how do you connect that with the other things you're about?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And that's still a work in progress. I really, I'm a martial artist, I'm a yogi, and I have found immense healing in a lot of embodied practices such as martial arts and yoga. And I also feel like it's been a huge opportunity for me to dive deeper into my own like introspective, self-reflective world. That has, before I actually came to shadow work, I feel like I've always kind of been doing shadow work. We all are to some degree. We just don't have language for it. And so my hope is that like I can bring more of the somatic, like the embodied side of what I do into more of the mind, more of like the neuroscience mind aspect of like what I do. And so some of what I do with clients is around like guided visualizations. So a little bit of, it's like dream work, but in real time. I'll do like a meditative session with people and I'll walk them through some kind of prompt that will begin to unlock some kind of subconscious pattern that they may notice at the end of the visualization. And so that's been fun because I think some people need more than just like a talking session. You know what I mean?
Right.
A lot of what I do too is also taking folks through like a lucid shadow process, which is playing with these archetypes. So like if you are someone who's triggered by this kind of person in society, then I take that and I flip it on its head and I'm like, hey, well, what's so bad about that person? And we start to unpack that so that people can start to see that like, oh, maybe actually some of that's in my shadow. And that's why I feel triggered by this kind of person, right? We create those binaries again, like this is bad, this is good. But in the future, I would love to, a lot of what I do with martial arts is really around like embodying the yin and the yang, like again, back to the masculine and the feminine. And capoeira specifically is the Afro-Brazilian martial art that is incredibly expressive and intuitive. There's not really any like, there aren't really any rules. It's more of a ritual. Yeah. And so what I love about that is that it's almost like, when you're playing capoeira, you see two spirits playing. You don't see a man and a woman playing, or a man and a man playing capoeira, right? To me, it's like you see the embodiment of two souls playing.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. And I think there's a lot to work with there. I mean, Jungian theory is so incredibly deep, and I'm just scratching the surface, to be honest, as a life coach. So eventually I would love to utilize some of that martial art philosophy to dive deeper into working with archetypes with people, and embodying both masculine and feminine. And with yoga, I would love to use breath work and some of the somatic, like grounding principles of yoga to help folks also tap into some of their shadow work. So there's a lot. I have a lot of ideas.
Yeah, I love it.
I just haven't actualized them. And I'm just kind of waiting I'm trying not to feel this rush of like, I need to create and put this out in the world. You know, I'm really trying to just allow myself to feel inspired as it hits and then put it out in the world. And then like, you know, practice the art of non-attachment to it too, you know, where it's like, I created this, boom, let it go and just see what comes with that.
Yeah, it's so difficult because I feel there's a lot of parallels like what you just described with like my own writing or creative stuff. Like, you know, this idea that I'm working on this thing and the pressure of the thing starts to build up, and then you suddenly find yourself drifting away from working on it, or because you're like, really, you know, for me anyways, I'm really just I'm scared of failing, or I'm worried about like
there's a shadow.
My head's built up around it. Yeah, exactly. Oh, there's lots of shadows in me.
We have them all.
And I just, you know, think that there's just a lot of parallels with how we invest our time and energy in something, and I'm curious like what your thoughts are, like, because when you really love something, like for me, I love to write in my spare time, but I almost feel like by trying to build up in my head that I am a writer, the less I wanted to write. Or like the more the thing that you are investing in becomes a part of your identity, it suddenly starts to lose, I don't know, like, or maybe that's just my own internal fear. Maybe that's, I don't know.
No, I totally, I resonate with that. Yeah. And I think we are so obsessed with identifying as something in our society, right? I think social media has like kind of exacerbated that too, where it's like in our little bios, we're like, this is who I am. And what's been fun about also, you know, fun and terrifying about going through an ego death of sorts is that like, I've started to realize like, you know, life coaching is not my purpose. It's a vessel in which my purpose is lived out. Right.
That's good.
And I think about that with like motherhood, which is something that I hope to become someday. It's like, I always had this fear that like when I became a mother, it had to then become my only identity and my only purpose. And then I started to just like kind of play around with that and realize like, oh no, like actually what I engage myself in can be a vessel in which my purpose is lived out. But I don't have to be attached to that thing. Like I'm multifaceted. Yeah. So like, what if writing for you is the vessel in which your purpose is lived out? You can call yourself a writer, sure, right? But also
it's
like,
just a thing I do.
It's just a thing you do, right?
Not who I am as a person.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think when we start to add weight to these things, it's like, oh, now I have to produce. And when we start to put pressure on producing, then we kind of like block the creative flow, you know, like,
absolutely.
And then we're like frustrated because we're like, why aren't the words running through my brain and out of my pen? And it's like, because you're approaching it from a different, like the river's blocked. Like there's Women Who Wrote the Wolves is one of my favorite books right now. She's a Jungian psychoanalyst, Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She talks about, I just read this chapter on creativity, which I'll send to you because even though it's more about the woman archetype, I do think this particular section you'd love. And she kind of talks about how like our creative life is like this river. She calls it like the river beneath the river. And she talks about this like, when we're creating these conditions in which we can actually create something, there's like blockages in the river. Like we're not letting it flow. When we're creating an idea of like, I have to be this, or we're attaching an identity to it, or we're putting pressure on ourselves to produce something, we're not allowing like the divine inspiration of that creativity to just fucking flow through us. You know what I mean?
It's amazing.
And like from a somatic perspective, I do believe it hits our bodies. Like I do believe energy gets stored in certain parts of our bodies. And until we become aware of that, we just are constantly kind of like storing, like we're blocking energy flow, you know what I mean, in our body. And that's why, like, you know, I'm sure have you ever been in just like the flow of writing and it just feels like everything just kind of aligns and you're just like in this intense moment of like feeling really at one with the universe. I know that sounds super woo woo, but like I've been there before, 100. Right? And in those moments, it's almost like your body feels like light, like things are like energy is coursing through the body. Yeah. And when we start to create from an outside perspective, all these conditions, then we start to block it. And that's when the writer's block comes in, or that's when the frustration sets in, or that's when we start to force ourselves to produce, you know? So it's like allowing ourselves to just like what's the word I'm trying to get at? Like rephrase the question of like, realign. What if this isn't my purpose, but it's a way that I actually am living my purpose out?
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. I needed to hear this. Thank you.
Yeah.
I
so
really appreciate it.
Freaking right, man.
Yeah. Like, you know, I've been, just sometimes I build it up in my head about producing something. And like, part of it was I was working on this fantasy series since I was a kid.
Nice.
And like, kind of finally just have to like let go of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really difficult because it was like so much of my writing inspiration or mentality was wrapped up in this series that I basically don't have the mental wherewithal or passion to finish it because I realize I'm not that person anymore. Yeah. When I started writing this series, I very black and white worldview, and I kind of end up creating a whole world and series of characters that just don't reflect. Like I've tried to revisit. I've tried to like shape and mold the story to like who I am now and like how I see the world, and trying to remove this whole these are good guys, these are bad guys, the binary mindset. And you can't stifle creativity by just trying to reshape the old stuff all the time. Yeah. And so much of like my ego really was tied to this like series that still cannot get it out there. The Remnant, the Legend of the Seer. No. Now
love it
on Amazon.
But that old, like the old stuff is like, this is the beautiful thing about us as people is like we evolve.
Right.
So we can like accept that like it, like as you were talking, I was like, no, the story's writing itself right now. Like you have evolved as a person, as Micah, and so has your story that you're writing. Right. And like when you think about any hero's journey, it always starts out like it never ends where it begins, but it does come full circle to some degree. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And so it's almost like I wonder, like as you were talking, I was sitting here thinking like, I wonder if J.K. Rowling, like she wrote how many books? Like not 7?
Yeah, that's for the Harry Potter series.
Yeah, like totally different person at the beginning than at the end, I would assume. And how that evolved over time, right? And it's like one of the greatest collections that we've known. So like you never know what could actually come from it, you know?
And most authors, they write, I think the average is like 2 to 3 books before they ever get any of them published, like one published. Like they'll write a whole book that never gets published. It just sits on their computer, and it's just like, and it's like you're saying, it's an evolution of that author's personal story.
Yes.
That like, it wasn't a loss to write that fantasy series or like that book and a half I started off with. And I might go back and revisit it someday, but I just kind of was like, I've built up so much pressure in my head around finishing the series and trying to like make a thing out of it. And I just realized like, I have all these other creative ideas for these other stories that I'm like, I just need to work on that. Yeah. Because it's like you're saying, when you feel that energy connection with a character in the story and like, oh, I can write this person and it'll flow better. And then just like, okay, I'm just going to do a couple hundred words, you know, and that's basically all. Like there'd be times in the past where I'd be like, okay, I'm going to write all day Saturday and I'm not leaving until I've written 2,000 words, you know? And like you're saying, that's the capitalism. Like that's the produce. And instead just being like, there's way less pressure to just accept I can do 200 words today with work and everything else going on in my life. And I'm not a full-time author, so it's great. I don't have to, there's not this identity tied to it, you know?
Yeah. And that's why they say that some of the best books are the ones that were written before there was a book deal.
Yeah.
Because once you sign a book deal, now it's like, oh, I have to produce this thing.
Right.
And I feel like the writer's block or the pressure, talk about like insane experience of like having to sign a book deal and then damn, I have to now write this thing instead of having something written that came from you so naturally, so like from a free flowing place that now you can put out into the world.
Yeah.
You know, it's different. It's a different approach.
Definitely. Although if there's anyone listening who wants to give me a book deal,
for
real. Just kidding. I'll get paid for it too. That'll be great. Yeah, Victoria, I know we I promise I wouldn't keep you here all night.
This has been great.
Yeah. Share with us, where can we find you online?
Yeah.
And read more, because you just launched your blog, right?
I did. I launched a website. I launched a blog. I'm trying to also connect back to my writing. So that's been a whole process. So I have a website. It's www.victoria-lynn.com. You can find me on Instagram at _V_Lynn, LYNN. And my website connects, you'll find all my information. You can find my blog. I like to post on Instagram, and I'm trying to get into Instagram Reels, which has been fun and awkward. So just I think your dog is like, it's like
she's itching or doing something.
She's like, come on, time's up. But yeah, that's where you can find me. So find me, follow me, DM me. I'm super excited to talk about shadow work. I'm going to be teaching at a couple festivals coming up. And I'm just always looking to collaborate. So if you know of people, or if our listeners want to collaborate to some degree, you know, I'm open. I really want shadow work to be a very accessible thing for everyone. So I just really enjoy and passionate about talking about it, because I think it's incredibly effective. Like, not that therapy isn't, like talk therapy is incredible.
Right.
But I think diving into some of these deeper, when it comes to matters of the soul, I think it's a little more psycho-spiritual, you know?
Right.
And I think that it gets a little bit more to the root cause of not just like why my brain thinks something, but like, let's talk about the fear and the belief and the emotion behind it. So.
Yeah. And you are taking on new clients.
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely taking on clients.
Victoria-Lynn, LYNN. .com.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's me.
Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is super fun. Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Until next time.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining me for the Pray for Micah podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review, and check out my YouTube channel and follow me on social media. Pray for Micah Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We'll see you next time.
You are now re-entering the normal world.